Hello, HR heroes, and welcome to another episode of HR Unplugged, a better way to improve performance that doesn't include a PIP. Performance management can be packaged in a variety of ways. For many companies, that includes helping employees improve with a designated performance improvement plan or a PIP. But is there a better way? In this episode of HR Unplugged, Anita Grantham and Vanessa Brulotte talk about the other options for performance management and how you can help employees improve without a PIP. In this episode, you'll hear why a PIP might not be the right option for performance improvement and what you can do instead. Thank you for tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by BambooHR, the complete HR software. Simplify HR with award-winning solutions for everything from hire to retire with BambooHR.
Hi, BambooHR here. Do you know what your employees really want? I mean, besides more money, of course, and better benefits, maybe an in-house masseuse. Ooh, a never-ending supply of chocolate chip cookies fresh from the oven and gooey. Besides all that, what do they want? Well, they want to feel energized and free to do their best work. That's where I come in. I'm user-friendly, fast, accurate. Employees, managers, admins, they all love me. It's easy to switch, too. Give it a try at BambooHR.com. That's BambooHR.com.
Well, let's dive in. We are so excited to have everybody here for another episode, a better way to improve performance that may or may not include a PIP. I told Vanessa that my opener on this is I'm just always on a performance improvement plan. And if I view life that way, it's much easier for me. So I don't know. I think it's a fun way to look at it. So we're going to talk about how performance management can be packaged in a lot of different ways. We're going to walk through other options and how you can help your team with their performance management without the dreaded PIP word. We've got a lot of great content to share, and I'm excited to kick this off with my partner in crime, Vanessa.
Yes, it's a really exciting topic for today. All right, well, let's start off our conversation talking about performance improvement plans. We have some good data to set the tone for this discussion. Can you share some of that with us, Anita?
Yeah, so it looks like this majority matches the data that 66% of organizations use some type of PIP when they're addressing performance issues with employees. It's generally accepted as the right option for most companies when they have an employee that is struggling. And 58% who complete a PIP typically improve their performance. This data was really interesting to me because, as many of you said, it really helps and you just go straight to the big T anyway. But it shows here that if it's done well, which is what we want to see as an outcome, you can get people to improve their performance and generally see positive results. So that's what we want to strive for today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you showed that 58% of employees see positive results. But what about the 42% that don't see the positive results? Like, why do PIPs not work for everyone?
I don't know, Vanessa. This is the way I usually look at this. Like when I have a teammate and a leader that are at odds with each other, I like to go to one of them and say, hey, what do you see the problem to be? And I go to the other one and I say, what do you see the problem to be? And usually the problem statement is very different. They don't see the world the same way. And to me, if they don't see the world the same way, your PIP is going to fail. If so, you've got to get them to get on the same page around what performance looks like and what success looks like. And if you don't have that, you're never going to be that 58%. You'll land in the non-effective bucket.
Mm-hmm. One, it's just the same as going back and redefining, making sure you're very clear on the role expectations in those different places. If you've got those two employees that are at conflict with each other, are you super clear to where everyone understands what those role expectations are? Because if not, it's like time to reevaluate it.
The brand of a PIP is negative. I think everybody, who starts in the organization as part of their onboarding should have a PIP, or I love an employee development plan. Last week, we talked about individual development plans. I always have a plan of what I'm working on. I think that's just part of what you do. It's actually called a job description. That is our development plan, right? That's what we were hired to do. And so you've got to keep in mind, like there's 4 different types of personalities in the world. Pick your favorite personality test. And you've got to make sure you structure the vehicle in a way that speaks to the employee and what their needs are to kick out their efforts into higher gear to actually be able to deliver on the work that they committed to delivering when they accepted the job. That's what I don't want us to get lost in, right? right? Like you saw this job description, you said you were qualified for the job. It's our mutual contract that you get paid for delivering this work. Did you see the work differently? That's the place I love to start. Did you not see the job description as accurate? Because for others, sometimes PIPs only treat the symptoms of the performance issue and not the root problem. And so you kind of have to go back to what are the expectations of the role and how do we help that person be successful? But I don't know about you, Vanessa, like I've had leaders before that don't want the person to be successful.
Yep.
And so I'll just ask, like, if you can't get behind this person winning, we should literally fire them now, because there's nothing worse than working for a leader that isn't behind you in your performance. And that's what I think you have to get to the bottom of before you even get into a plan. What do you think, B?
I think so. Well, and the other perspective on that too is if you've got a leader not willing to do their role, they are there to have careers in their hands. And if they're not willing to take hold of that and that responsibility, it might need to be a review of that particular leader with their leader to say, hey, are you willing to take on your job responsibilities and your level of role to be able to help these people be successful? Because then, that should be reviewed as well.
It's so true. Like we forget as leaders that we have hearts in our hands. I love Vanessa's statement, careers in our hands. And your number one job as a leader is to help that person do the best work of their life. And oftentimes leaders don't recognize that as a responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I love what Libby had said. We use a PIP as a last resort. They come only when a period of development hasn't worked. And we'll definitely dive deeper into that, I promise, because that's true. It should be the last tool in the tool belt to use, not the first. And it's
going to be the first. Like, I think that's what we're like kind of testing is maybe first, because oftentimes, I don't know, Vanessa, how many times you've seen that. I've never seen a development plan oftentimes. Right. Mm-hmm. So if they've gone through that thing of development, they're like, now I want a PIP. I'm like, well, what was your plan? And where was it documented? And what were the milestones? All of the things that we would put into a PIP. And oftentimes they don't have those things.
Yeah. 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 And it's like, what can you do? What are steps you can take to make sure that you're clearly defining and having no ambiguity and making sure there's no miscommunications, no misalignments between the two people? What does that documentation look like? And I have a few examples too that I'll be sharing that might be useful for some folks too. And it's important to use PIPs in the right way and ensure you have the minimum expectations outlined when you set up that PIP. So imagine if you wrote out a PIP that wasn't up to par with the minimum expectations of the role. And, but then you're back to square one after the employee passes because they start missing some crucial expectations right after getting off the PIP because you didn't outline it the right way. That creates such a bad employee experience to feel like, hey, but I just hit the goal that you set for me. Now you're telling me that I'm failing. That's not great leadership. And so it's setting the right expectations up front and the goals in place. And again, making sure there's no ambiguity. That's what that documentation provides. Anita, what other places have you seen like a PIP fail?
Well, I just want to double click into a point you made, Vanessa, that I think is so important for us as we're facilitating this document between the leader and the teammate. What are the roles and commitments of the teammate? And what are the roles and commitments of the leader? Oftentimes we look at it as a one-way path. We're like, teammate, you've got to get your stuff up to par and you've got to do all these things. Well, what are the commitments of the leader? Because oftentimes we can't really see where the leader is lacking in this. And we as the facilitator of this process, we need to be open that our leader is not setting this person up for success. So I like them to be like, hey, are you having a weekly one-on-ones? Are you providing training development? Are you providing a buddy or a peer inside the organization for this person to get coaching and development outside of you or whatever it is? But you've got to be able to say at the end of that period or at a weekly check-in. I also love a weekly or bi-weekly check-in on how progress is coming so you can get ahead of it. The leader's responsibilities need to be clearly mapped inside of one of these plans.
Yes, that's so perfect, kind of lines up with something that I wanted to talk about too, is that one of the biggest mistakes leaders make is, creating that negative brand for PIPs by saying, okay, well, I'm putting them on the PIP. This is just to get them fired anyway. And you hear that and that's not the purpose, or it's not the right mentality for PIPs. And it's really important that the leader, like you said, schedule those weekly check-ins, making sure they're providing support and resources. Not, hey, you're going to go on a PIP and I'm not going to check in with you until the end. And if you're not up to par with my expectations, then you're gone. It's like, no. As a leader, you've done all you can with coaching and feedback for the last several months. This person still is not implementing that feedback. You've implemented the PIP. So now you're, checking in with them weekly, making sure like, hey, we've got all these expectations. How can I provide support for you? Sometimes that's a chance to see if there's other roadblocks in the business that are holding that individual back from hitting those expectations. Or maybe there's blind spots to things that you as a leader aren't seeing that you can help provide that support. That's why we see that metric for the 53% or whatever of individuals that succeed from a PIP is because they probably have great leaders that are providing that support throughout and making sure that they're set up for success.
Yeah. Or maybe the job has changed, right? Important to work like a culture of learning into the environment, right, Vanessa? Because like I was just giving an example on the prep where I had a direct report on my team. We met last week around a topic. It was a real crap show, right? The meeting didn't go well. Like it was just kind of a mess. And we had a one-on-one after this group meeting. And I just got on the call with her and she's like, that was really bad. And I was like, hey, it's not bad. What did you learn? Like, what did you learn? What are we going to, how can we look at it differently? And I'm really committed to this person and we're going to make mistakes. And so I was like, let's talk openly about what we would want to do better or different. It was like, here are the few things, like, let's you and I connect before we go out into a group meeting. Maybe I need to be more explicit around what my expectations are. Like, I love the definition of expectations are usually unsaid requests that are never spoken into reality. And then this other person is out there doing things, but they're never hitting because you never let them know. Right? Mm-hmm. Like I love using the example of people in relationships and they have an expectation of like their partner taking them out for their birthday or planning a party or planning a trip. And then the birthday comes and goes and nothing happens. And then they feel like uninspired by what happened, but they were never explicit with their request. Hey, it's my birthday. I'm turning 21. I expect that we're going to go out to Vegas and we're going to have like a big party. Right? If you're not explicit, then people don't know how to win. You've got to set people up for success. And we don't do that enough. And so no one can actually hit the target and they're taken off course.
Yes, 100%. 100%. I think about, I think about so many examples in personal life and work life where that is such the case where you have these expectations of somebody, but because there wasn't an agreement set, all of a sudden you're going to be disappointed every single time. I think you've said that before in the podcast. If there's no agreement set, you'll be disappointed every single time with what your own expectations are.
None of us are mind readers. And so we've just got to be able, if you want to make it work, go out and do it or help somebody meet your expectations. I want to go on a trip. I want it to be during these times. I want it to be in this region. I want to make sure that these are the accommodations. Right? You can do the same thing on a PIP, right? I need you to hit this target. It needs to be done this way. We need to be in demonstration of our values. These are the outcomes and write it down and make sure you both agree on it. You don't want to sound like, very demanding, but part of it is I think you've got to be explicit and also just keep it up, light, and direct, right? Like, hey, I want us to win and I'm committed to your success. And so let's talk about what winning looks like in this situation for both of us. What do you think it is? And put it up on a whiteboard. And then you can ask questions of like, hey, what about this? Or what about this? So you're not saying, do you need to do these things? Right? And I think it's through that kind of question asking and creating a shared vision together that you can co-create a vision for what success looks like inside of performance. And that's where you get a lot of leverage.
Yes. Well, do you think all organizations should be implementing PIPs and should it be something that all employees who are struggling are required to do?
I think everyone should implement a learning culture. And I think we should look at mistakes and failure as a positive thing. We talk about this all the time, but a PIP is the key action that ties values to action, right? So if you have a value that's like we all learn from our mistakes, you would want to have that in your weekly one-on-ones. Like, what did you fail at this week and what did you learn? And the other thing I love to do is you have to talk about it at your team meetings and you have to find a culture where you own your mistakes. There's many times in our leadership team meeting where I'm like, I missed that. I did not do that. I want you to take inventory right now. If you're on the call, how many times do you raise your hand and you're like, I fouled that up and that's on me. And these are the things I learned. And this is what I'm committed to doing better. If you want to have PIPs, you've got to be willing to do that because it starts at the top. And that's where we're missing. And PIPs aren't just for frontline team members. They've got to be for everyone. And it starts with a CEO that owns the mistakes. I totally agree with you, Eleanor. I find it more rare and rare that people own their own mistakes. And so we've got to create that inside the culture if you want to use PIPs. Otherwise, it's like, do what I say what I do. And it's the three monkeys, right? Hear no evil, see no evil. What's the third one? So you've got to make sure that you're building it top down and through the culture.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be consistent, because if you're not, I like that you mentioned it has to be at the top as well. And you have to make sure that how you're approaching the PIPs, whatever your development plan is for employees with performance management, make sure you're consistent across the company. Because if you're not consistent, it opens up for potential biases in how things are being approached, potential unfair treatment. Like, you want to make sure, like, you know, when I think we all really value employees and employee experience, like that's something you really need to consider when you implement something like this.
It's really true. And I think about this, I will own my own mistakes, but not somebody else's. And we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I'm a big fan of Extreme Ownership. It's a book by Jocko Willink. It's a really incredible true story. But in my world, if I'm head of a function, everything that happens on my team that's a mistake is my fault. It's 100% my fault. And so I would actually say, like, any bad Glassdoor review, any poor survey response, like, to me, that's how I take it, is that I'm responsible for anything that is a mishap inside of our culture. And it's my responsibility. I think it's that type of ownership we need to see from our leaders, to create a safe place to go and be able to look at those things. Because, like, I don't know about you, Vanessa, if you can get people to tell you what they're missing, you have access to things that you would never know. And I want that access. I want you to think about it like, if you're parents, this is what I do with our girls, is, you know, I'll be like, how did that slime get on the carpet? And immediately it's like, I don't use slime, right? You all know my love for slime on the show. And it's like, okay, if you can tell me what actually happened at the moment that it happened, we can make it better at that point and no one gets in trouble. But if you hide it, and it sits there and it ruins the whole couch, then we kind of have a problem, because we're all collectively responsible for our environment in this house that we live in, and we take care of our things together. So when somebody tells you right when it happens, you can partner and work through it. And that's what you want as a leader, is access. I want my team to feel so safe that when they come to me, I like embrace them, because no one can make me feel worse about my mistakes than myself. And so if Vanessa makes a mistake, I want her to feel like a warm embrace, a warm hug, and say, okay, how do you want to go about solving it? Let's work together. And then maybe we'll get together later and we'll be like, what the frick were you thinking? Let's talk about it, right? But we can laugh about it and be like, okay, like, let's come together. Right? But my team, hopefully, I hope you all know this, but I will always back my team to the business. Always. And I will take the fall, right? Mm-hmm. Vanessa may have done it, but I'll say, hey, it's my responsibility. I'll work with the team and make sure we get it in line. I won't name my name, and we'll come back as a team and be like, okay, what are we doing here? How do we figure it out? And we just had a major foul up like that just within the last month. We've had quite a few, actually, right? And the team comes together. It's like, what do we learn and what are we doing to improve?
Mm-hmm. I love that, because there's that element of like you as a leader owning the royal we, but then still holding individuals accountable at the same time, like to help build up. And it's interesting. It made me think of a story a few years ago where I learned that sometimes I have to think outside of my own scope, where with responsibilities, because sometimes we get so caught up in our day-to-day as well that we don't think about the royal we, like as a team and how it impacts. Like, so I was in a hiring leadership position, and there was some issues that we're finding with some hiring. And I won't go into details, but basically there were some issues, and I had some other business leaders saying like, hey, this is an issue. We need you to be a part of this conversation. I'm like, no, but it wasn't me. It wasn't my team. But I quickly learned, it was a really good learning opportunity for me to say, oh, wait, no, there is still an element I own, because I still impact the overall process. And so then once we could all get together and have more deeper conversations, cross collaboration, it helps with the overarching need of the problem to fix, like figure out what the right problem to solve is.
Yeah, give me somebody on the team that isn't responsible for employee experience. we have a mantra in our team, see something, say something. I don't care if it's not your job. You see something, you say something, because then we can get around it. I mean, Vanessa and I have had a handful of things that we both missed and the team has missed, right? So it's like, how do you, and we work on this with the team all the time. It's like awareness to something bigger, commitment to our mission, and demonstration of our values in a bigger way. I mean, to me, that's where like you can pull in, make it count into the experience. If I really want to make it count, I'm not going to let anything go by. And the biggest thing I've learned for everyone on this call is my gut always informs me. And if I'm not listening to it, then I'll miss it. But my gut is usually spot on. And if something feels wrong, I owe it to myself and the team to spend a minute figuring out what it is. And there's many times where I'm like, something's off in this. I'm not sure what it is. What else do you see in it? So we can figure this out. I like this, Eleanor, how I like to know how to do better the next time. So let me know how I can do better. I ask that question at most of the ends of my one-on-ones of like, how can I be better or different for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, to kind of shift a little bit, I know that we were talking about, is the PIP the right first step? And something to consider too is there are other options out there. I know other people were saying like, I like to do development plans or, have clear conversations. There's a couple of techniques that you could utilize to help get that alignment that you're looking for with those individuals without needing to put a PIP in place yet. Because really, it should be, again, the last tool in the tool belt that you use. And so if you are starting to notice some patterns of behavior or low performance, consider using the SBI framework. But the SBI model is from the Center for Creative Leadership, and it refers to the situation behavior impact model. And it's the framework used for giving feedback effectively. So a few definitions of each component. Situation describes the specific context or circumstances where the observed behavior occurred. It sets the stage for a clear understanding of the feedback by providing a context for the behavior in question. Behavior identifies the specific actions, words, or observable conduct exhibited by the individual. Impact explores the consequences of the effects of the behavior. And so it's a model that can help you with both positive and negative feedback, stating like, hey, in this situation, in the team meeting, the behavior that you exhibited was like, hey, I really like that you gave some shout outs to the individuals who were having some really great wins this week. That impacts our overall team camaraderie and unity that we're trying to exhibit for this quarter. And so helping teach the right behaviors. You can use that model for that type of feedback. For negative feedback, it's, hey, in this particular meeting, you were talking over other individuals. The impact of that is it shut down a lot of individuals feeling like they couldn't have their voices heard. And we really need everybody to feel like they can be open in these conversations and engaged so that we can get to even better and greater outcomes. Let me help you with ways that you can respond to things that you disagree with better. And so helping use these frameworks can help clearly define like, hey, behaviors impact, and then set those expectations moving forward about like, hey, instead, use these frameworks. Here's how you can do things better, setting the right expectations. It's a very simple thing without having to do like a really long documented thing with them, but it helps clear out like to make sure there's no ambiguity. Another technique prior to a PIP is using like kind of a coaching plan. I know people have said development plan. And this could just be like, again, setting the right expectations, the right alignments to what the role expectations are. So you can talk about like in a recap with the individual, work on the document together and say, hey, here's the areas that need improvement. Here's expectations moving forward. Employee, what are the goals that you want to drive towards? What do those look like? Here's the role expectations. What are your goals to get there? And then let's list together, bullets of ways that I can provide support for you. Is there training, resources? What can I do to provide for you? Because then it's a collaborative conversation. They're really able to help coach this individual, be like, hey, you own your pathway. Let me help you get there because you're not hitting the mark right now. What can I do to support you? And it really creates like even that building that trust with that leader and employee, that relationship becomes stronger with that. And then good communication is definitely key in all of this. And that does not just mean verbal communication and encouragement. Recap your one-on-ones with employees. These recaps could be you sending it to the employee or them sending it to you. Either way, then you both can ensure to ask questions if there's something one is missing. Saying, hey, team member, am I missing anything from this conversation? Or saying, hey, team member, actually, there's a couple of bullets that you missed. Let's make sure to get alignment on that and discuss in our next one-on-one. Because sometimes we think we're saying all the right things when we're talking to employees, but it might not be getting across in the right way because we all have different perceptions, different ways that we're hearing things that are being said. And sometimes we accidentally beat around the bush without knowing it. So having that written documentation of recaps helps make sure that there's clear understanding between the two parties.
Yeah. And when I'm the one on the PIP, if I document every week, hey, these are the things I'm doing, it's also helpful for you, right? So I like to send, we're actually testing this on our leadership team. We're all sending kind of 5 bullet updates to our CEO every week. Like, these are the things. And I use that to document some things that maybe I'm not getting a chance to in my one-on-ones or aren't getting covered. But I think putting it in writing is so key. I think the other thing too, that I just want to go back to that we don't get in either of these models, like on SBI, before the situation, I think it's important to ask the person their context of the situation. We don't do this enough. We think that our context is truth. And I know that it is not, that somebody else has a story about what happened. And I want to understand, again, the goal is access to information. So if Vanessa did something, I want to go and be like, hey, V, talk to me about what was going on for you at this point in the podcast. You had said this. I saw this comment in the chat. Why did you answer it this way? And keep it super light, right? I'm fact finding. I'm an investigator that is really open. And so I want to go ask really open-ended questions to hear her side of what's happening. And I actually may learn something, going back to that learning culture, that makes my feedback null or void or changes. And I think that's really important. Like, I'm a big innocent until proven guilty person. And so just because a leader has an experience and it may look really bad, it may even smell really bad, I still want to give that opportunity a chance, that person an opportunity to voice their perspective in the situation.
I love that, because then you get to know both sides of the coin to make a better judgment.
Yeah, I think it's so, so important. So don't miss out on that context from the get-go. Be an investigator. Stay curious, Wendy. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, what should organizations do instead of PIPs? Like, what ideas do you have for better performance management?
Well, I think I'm going to go back to the cake, right? I want it woven into your vision, mission, strategy, and values somewhere. I want it woven in before you've got an issue, right? So like another comment was, I want to look at the pattern. As people leaders, we're looking for patterns, not one-off mistakes. So I want to identify a pattern that's hindering our ability to get to our strategy, that isn't in alignment with our values, and therefore isn't supporting the mission. Because the other thing, and Nikki, I'll answer your question. The other thing you want to do is you don't want to make it personal. You want to make it about the work, right? You want to say, hey, our strategy is to go, our mission is to set people free to do great work. Inside of that, our strategy is to go do X, Y, and Z. Do you see it that way? Yes, I see it that way. Then tell me how this action that you're taking repeatedly is getting us to that outcome. Right? So you're making it about the work. You're not making it between two individuals. And I think that is really important. And that way they're never surprised by the issues, because you're talking about it in your one-on-ones. It's not a special meeting, and you're documenting it in a follow-up. Like when Vanessa and I have one-on-ones, we use the same document, right? And it ends up being hundreds of pages long. But then that way we can go back and sort by date and say, hey, Vanessa, we've been talking about the same pattern over the last 12 months, right? So you can see it in the notes that are there that you're both contributing to. Organizations that effectively measure employee productivity experience a 21% increase in productivity compared to those that do not. So this is direct to the bottom line. So a few things, to do better one-on-one check-ins, be committed to your one-on-ones. Don't miss those. Make sure that they're clear goals that are connected to the goals of the business, right? We've talked about cascading goals, and address issues immediately. We've talked about this a lot on the show. There's no one on my team that is surprised. Like what I just gave you in that example from last week, that really happened. And I was like, when's my next one-on-one with this person? Luckily, it was the next hour and we handle it immediately. No one's left to be surprised or like, is Anita mad at me? Is something happening? No, I'm going to call you right away within that 24-hour period. And we're going to talk about what we both saw and work it out. So we don't have to like hold on to it, right? There's nothing worse than a leader that's been holding on to all these issues that finally they break, right? You all see this all the time. And they're like, fire this person. And you're like, when have you talked about it? And they're like, never, but they've done it 100 times, right? And you're like, okay, but where is it? And where have you communicated it? Like, are you really committed to the career in your hand? Because if you were, you would have not let it get to this point. And oftentimes it's got to be that type of pain for leaders to understand the responsibility that they've taken on by leading people. It's a huge responsibility. I still ask people why they want to do this job, right? Because if you don't really care about the humans you have in your hands, then you should be an individual contributor. And that's okay. It's totally okay. And then know when it's time to like call it, right? When is the yellow card? When is the red card? And it's when you both aren't committed anymore, right? The employee is saying, hey, I see this is what you need. I'm not prepared to deliver it. And the leader is saying, this is what I need. You aren't prepared to deliver it. What else can we do with this, right? It shouldn't be a heavy conversation. It should be a mutually agreed to path, unless you're just working with people that just can't see it, which sometimes we have. But I want to say that it's probably less than 2% of the population. Like we're all adults. And if we treat people like adults, we should be able to get through these things really well and not be surprised. It's so important. Like, I had a team member that wanted to continue to grow. We would meet after every presentation that he would do. And he'd be like, what can I do better? And I'd be like, this, and this. He'd be like, great. He'd go on and work on it. And then we would do it again. And we'd go through it. What can I do better? What did you learn? This, and this. Great. Let's go through it. And it can just be a cadence inside your relationship. It doesn't have to be a thing. It doesn't have to be a form. It doesn't have to be a program. You just build it into your normal cadence of how you're developing people. That's what this is, human development.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that too, because then it teaches that individual too, to not be reliant solely on you to provide all the feedback. You set the standard right from the beginning, and then all of a sudden they're looking for the learnings and the standard and saying, oh yeah, I missed on this, and this. Like I've done that before where I was told like, hey, you need to work on this. And then when we do the recap after those moments, it's like, I initially come back and say, you know what? I could have done A, B, C, done better. It's like, oh yeah, I agree with you. Hey, there's one thing you missed from there. And it helps in that relationship for sure.
And the other thing you can do, Risa, in not making it a program is that you can give data. And you can say, hey, over the last 6 months, we've been working this into our one-on-ones. And we can see through our engagement survey that people feel supported in what they need to do. They are clear on the expectations of what success looks like in their job. And they feel like they have a leader that will help them remove roadblocks. Why wouldn't we do this across the organization? So start it somewhere with leaders that are really great and really proficient at these conversations, map the data, and then serve it up to other leaders that are having challenges in these areas.
Mm-hmm. Well, you kind of teed this up a little bit in your previous comment, but what if managers are unwilling to be better about one-on-ones and share better expectations with employees? Do you think that HR is sometimes in a position that requires them to put a PIP in place? If so, what's the best way to go about it?
I absolutely do not think so. It is not our job to run a performance plan for a leader. Their job is to be performance driven in their job. That's why they're managers. So if they don't see it, it is not up to us. I think we can give pros and cons. We can influence. We can share best practices. We can share what it looks like to be a leader inside the organization, right? Like inside our organization, you signed up to lead from where you are. What does lead from where you are look like? Would one-on-ones, consistent one-on-ones fit into that? If you really want to do the right thing by your team, what would that look like? Have them get into it and tell you what it is. And then say, as a leader, are you committed to these things? Well, I've got a lot going on right now. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. I really don't like having these conversations. I'm conflict adverse. Great. Then let's get you out of this job. No problem. I want you to be successful. I want you to feel like you're winning every day. And sometimes leaders just don't, and they're not cut out for this. And that's okay. This isn't a shame game, right? So this is where you've got to help them help themselves. These are our values, Hazel. And so I have them on cards, and these are old ones, but I like them better than the new ones. But the new ones are better because they have the definition of the value on the back. So this really helps leaders have a tool for what the value looks like in action. And I'm a big fan of them as a tool for leadership development. And sometimes the manager needs a PIP themselves. That's why I tell you, I'm always on a PIP. That's what I do. I lead myself on a permanent PIP.
Always the learning and development mind is Anita. Well, do you have any advice for Cynthia? Because Cynthia had mentioned, definitely agree. However, so often we in HR have managers who don't want to manage, but they think that they are good managers.
Yeah, show them the data. Get out the engagement survey, right? Start helping them track their data. Show them their attrition. You know, I love this question. Would you refer me as a leader? We do this as an organization, right? Would you refer this organization for somebody else? Would you refer me as a leader? Look, there's lots of things I'm great at. There are lots of things I suck at. Not everybody is going to love working for me, and that's okay. But have the leader get clear on what the vision is for themselves and who they want to be. And are they measuring up to that? And are they committed to the work it's going to take to get there? And if not, let's help them figure out what they can do. But data is the key on attraction, retention. You know, a big point I always look at is, can they attract talent in? Are they attracting great talent in? Do people want to come and work for them? And then do people want to stay with them? And then what does your engagement data look like? And use that to help them say, what does this story tell you? Does this look like, you know, what does success look like for you as a leader? Let's define it. And then let's create that as our bar and see how we do against it. And have them be part of that creation.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing we talked about previously in other podcast episodes is it a will or a skill issue? If it's a skill issue, it's like, yeah, provide that support. Like Anita was saying, if it's a will issue, trying to understand why, like why aren't they implementing it? And also discovering, are there circumstances where they're willing to implement it for some and not others? And why, I know somebody mentioned this earlier, is like, they shouldn't be managers. You know, why would we want somebody with careers in their hands who isn't willing to put in the work to be a leader? Maybe they aren't suited to be a leader. And that's something you need to discuss, and figure out. But also, what is from the top level down, what's your criteria and expectations for leadership? Do you have that outlined as an expectation, like that shared expectation across that line of leadership of what that expectation is, so you can hold that accountable, but it comes from the top down?
Yeah, it's got to be the top down. Otherwise, it's really tough. And you're right. They can be a great individual contributor. We do this all the time. We take our best individual contributors and we put them in leadership roles. And I don't know why we still do this. Like, it's just mystifying to me, you know, and have them do a tour of duty as a leader and see if they really enjoy it. Right? I just, you know, if you cash leadership paycheck, you get the responsibilities. It's true. And, you know, oftentimes the individual contributors make more than the leaders. So there's no shame in saying, as like a great salesperson, they're making more on commissions than we are, for sure. So you've just got to really match what your passions are into the job to be done, and own it from that perspective. Like a leadership tour of duty would say, hey, if you're a great individual contributor and you think you really want to have hearts in your hands, why don't we have you as a team lead for a quarter or two? And why don't you go through our leadership onboarding, right? How many of you are doing onboarding with your leaders to say, like, here's how we think about compensation. Here's how we think about hiring. Here's how we think about attraction, right? Have they gone through all of those things? Start putting them through some mentoring and ride-alongs around hiring, retention, conversations, performance conversations, and say, do you want to do this all the time? Because as soon as you leave your day job, you're actually not doing that anymore. You have to do it through people and get them inspired to go do it on your behalf, which is way harder. So, you know, really spell it out for them and give them a chance by leading cross-functional projects, things that they have to influence through people on. And that will give them a good sense if they want to make it their day job or not. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. Any other final thoughts, Vanessa, from you?
No, there's one question in the Q&A I'd love to answer before we go out.
Let's do it.
So this one's from Lindsay. If they don't see it and will not participate in a PIP or counseling process, but still want to fire someone, what do you do? So
that's where I think you've got to have a clear wrap-in on who owns the decision. I mean, I think the leaders have got to own the decision, but if it comes into a risk or compliance space, that's where I love to have outside counsel weigh in. And this is where you use your lawyer friends to say, hey, what are the risks of doing this? And then you kind of do an assessment of like, is it worth the risk to do this? And you get the leader involved with that conversation of like, hey, you are making decisions on behalf of the organization. Given the risk, would you want to take it on? If you were the business owner, would you say yes to this? Part of it is just educating them about what's at play and doing that. And there's nothing better than a good labor and employment attorney to spell that out for them.
I love that. I love it. Well, just a couple final thoughts around everything that we've been discussing, because we've had a lot of goodness today. It sounds like someone's going to be sharing their recording with their senior team. So how exciting. But just a couple of things just to kind of note is, remember, PIPs should never be a surprise. Having consistent communication and clearly documented conversation showcasing that you're talking to the individual, not about them, to ensure no ambiguity is in place of what their role expectations are, and utilizing techniques like the SBI framework and making sure that you're clearly giving feedback in a timely manner, coaching sessions, making sure you're collaborating with them on their goals and how they want to move forward, what their roadmap is, and really doing your part as a leader to help people be successful on the PIP, because a PIP does not equal termination. It could be an outcome, but it is not equal to. So making sure to do their part to support that employee, because like we saw earlier, there's people that do succeed out of PIPs when it's done well, and there's that support and resources provided. Anita, any final thoughts?
Thank you again, Vanessa. We love this conversation. We love all the work that you all are doing out there. You're creating great places to work, and we're so proud of the work that you're doing. We have a few blog posts for any of you looking for more tools on how to get this done. And again, we invite you to visit us at hrunplugged.com, where you can be invited to all of our future episodes. You can listen and share all of our past episodes and subscribe to the series and view all of our past episodes in your favorite format. If you have anything else you want to share with us, we'd love feedback. Remember, we're on a permanent PIP here at HR Unplugged. So give us all of your feedback inside the survey that's coming up next. And stay tuned for our next episode. Have a great day. Hearts, hearts, love, love.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for HR Unplugged. This series is brought to you by BambooHR. Visit us at bamboohr.com/HR-unplugged for video versions of the podcast, additional resources, and to learn more about how BambooHR sets people free to do great work.